Given that we have just emerged from the Yontif of Chanukas HaMizbeach, so I thought perhaps it would be me'inyono to begin with an inyan that is not directly related to the halachas of Birchas Hanehnin. It's a halacha b'negea to Birchas Shechianu. But there is a very broad machlokes harishonim in the parameters of Birchas Shechianu, which has its makar almost exclusively in our sugya on the Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, in the brisa that precedes the Shakla Bataria of the dinim of the Pirurim of Pas. Be'ez Hashem, next week's limud will be in the Oimek HaSugya and the Sugya Kasha and of the dinim of Piruri Pas. But I thought as a sequitur to Chanukah and as an introduction to the sugya, to discuss a number of yesodis that emerge from the Rishonim in the dinim of Shechianu, which come from this brisa. Before the Gemara discusses the bracha that's made on menachos, the Gemara says, and this is on page 6 of the Marmakomis pages, in the middle of the Omud, in the brisa of Tanu Rabbanon. Hoya oimed umakriv menachos b'Yerushalayim. Oimer baruch shekimonu v'giyonu lazman hazeh. Notlon v'ochlon mevarach hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. So before the Birchas HaNehenen on the Achila of Menachos, which will be Be'ez Hashem and Blinei the limud for next week's sugya, the brisa discusses the oimed umakriv. Hoya oimed umakriv. Now, who is the oimed umakriv? Rashi says, Hoyo Yisrael oimed umakriv menachos. The Yisrael is the one who is bringing his carbon mincha. Rashi says, makriv menachos v'nosna la'koyen lahakriva. He gave it to the kohen to be makriv on the mizbeach. Oimer baruch shechionu im lo hevi menachos ze yomim rabim. Now, why does Rashi explain that the brisa is talking about Hoya Oimedu Makriv is talking about the Yisrael? Tosfos will ask that the simple reading of the brisa would imply that Hoya Oimedu Makriv is the Kohen. Why does Rashi say that Hoya Oimedu Makriv refers to the Yisrael? And we'll see, Tosfos will ask that question on Rashi, but the answer lies in Rashi's words. Rashi says, what does Rashi mean to say? Because if the Kohen would be the one to be makriv, then the Kohen would have to make a bracha of asher kitshonu b'kedushasei shel Aaron v'tzivonu lahakriv menachos. This din that we're familiar with from the halachas of Birchas Koyanim is a din in all avodas kodesh. The very first Mishnah Lamelech in Hilchas Maisa HaKorbanos. The Mishnah Lamelech brings from the Ramban in the Hasagas the Sefer HaMitzvos. I've got to say the Chavivos of Inyoni Kodshim is Moshe Chas a little bit into Inyonim that are out of Ketz on the Bרכת. Poshet, we've emerged from the Chanukas HaMizbeach and we were mischanen for Oz Egmar B'Shir Mizmor. So the Chavivos of Oimek Divrei Rishonim in Teras HaKorbanos is a little bit irresistible. So the Mishnah Melech says that the Ramban in Sefer HaMitzvah says that every avodah that a kohen does, and he specifically refers to menachos, every stage of the avodah b'menachos. The brisa later in our Gemara and Brachos discusses the psisa, the crumbling of the mincha. Even the crumbling, says the Ramban. And he makes the bracha of asher kitshonu b'kedushasei shel Aaron v'tzivonu lasos kach v'kach. That's what the Mishnah Melech says the Ramban means. And then the Mishnah Melech goes on to bring a fascinating machlokes where the Lev Someach, one of the Noisei Kelim on the Mefarshim on the Sefer HaMitzvah, says that the Rambam disagrees with that. And the Rambam holds that one only makes the bracha of asher kitshonu b'kedushasei shel Aaron v'tzivonu lasos kach v'kach on what the Lev Sameach calls the avodah gedola, which seems to be the main avodah of the Hakravas HaKarban. And all other avodas, which he calls avodas haktanos, nifteres ima. They are all included in that bracha. So this is a achloikes between the Rishonim, according to the Lev Sameach. Mishnah possibly suggests that the Rambam may actually fundamentally agree with the Ramban on this. Yes. And v'tzivonu lasais avoda kach v'kach. Azoi is mavur in Mishnah Melech. Now, in the Gemara, and this is what Rav Shlomo pointed out, it's not mufurish that bracha is the nusach habracha by avoda b'kachim. It's mufurish that when a kohen comes to eat truma, and the Rambam brings it down, when a kohen comes to eat kachim, he says, "Asher kitzonu b'mitzoyse v'tzivonu b'nishoshan lechol truma, asher kitzonu b'mitzoyse v'tzivonu lechol kachim." The Mishnah Melech says that when the Ramban says that the kohen makes a bracha on every avodah, it means that bracha also. So therefore, Rashi is bothered by that. If we're talking about the kohen who's being makriv, so then the Braysh should say, "Hoya oime du makriv mevorech asher kitzonu b'nishoshe shel Aaron lahakriv." It doesn't bring that in the Braysh. Therefore, Rashi explains that the Brayse is referring to a Yisrael. Now, why is the Yisrael making a bracha of shechionu? So Rashi says, "Im lo yehevi menocha ze yomim rabim." He hasn't brought menachas for a long time. Now, Rashi is a chiddush gadol in the halachas of shechionu. Ordinarily, we associate, as we'll see in the Rishonim, that the bracha of shechionu is made on a mitzvah which occurs from time to time and is fixed, that comes from time to time. Matzah, lulav, shofar, sukkah. As we'll see in the Rishonim in Masechta Sukkah. A mitzvah which you could fulfill anytime. It just happens to be that for that individual, it hasn't occurred in a while. Where do we find a sugya of Bircha Shechianu in that case? Rashi says, since he wasn't makriv, a limpa, zeh yomim rabim, we have a bracha of Shechianu. Where's this chiyah from? Secondly, we'll also have to define what it means, shaloi hikriv yomim rabim. How long is yomim rabim? What's the shir of yomim rabim? Shmeinu Masiyayim. What's the shir of yomim rabim? So if we look on the top right of the first page of the Maramakomis pages, there's brought the lashon of the Rambam in Hilchos Brachos in Perek Yud Aleph, where the Rambam gives us the parameters of the chiyuvim of Bircha Shechion. So first, the Rambam gives us the din that's familiar. Kol mitzvah shehi mizman lizman. Any mitzvah which occurs from one specified time period to another specified time period. Could go in shofar, which is from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, sukkah, lulav, mikra megillah, ner Chanukah. That's the first mitzvah that's mechayev Birchas Shechion. First category. V'chein, kol mitzvah shehi kinyan loy. Any mitzvah which involves an object. Kigoin tzitzis, tefillin, mezuzah, umaike. Now, just as an aside, and this is not Hasugi right now, the Rambam doesn't mean because you make a shechion on the object like someone who buys new clothing. The Birkei Yosef in Hilchos Tefillin points this out. That the Rambam doesn't mean that when a person buys new tefillin, he makes because he owns tefillin, or he buys a new talis, he's making it on the talis. What the Rambam means is any mitzvah that involves a new object, that gives a chashivus to the mitzvah. And therefore the mitzvah is mechayev a bracha of shechionu. That's as an aside. It's not our Indian. Our Indian in this sugya is the third case of the Rambam, which the Rambam now brings. Then the Rambam says, "V'chein mitzvah she'eno tedira," a mitzvah that isn't regular, isn't frequent, ve'eno mitzuya b'chol eis, and isn't common. Shaharehi doime lemitzvah shehi mizman lizman. Says the Rambam, we find a category of mitzvah which is similar to Zman Lizman, which means a mitzvah that only occurs Mizman Lizman. Then we make a broch of Shechionu al Zman, Shechionu la Zman hazeh of the mitzvah. So Zot the Rambam, a mitzvah which is Toder and Matsui, so there's no particular Zman that is unique to when this mitzvah is being done. Zot the Rambam, but there's something which is similar to a mitzvah she Zman Lizman, which is a mitzvah she'eno tedira ve'eno mitzuya b'chol eis, which means that the mitzvah now being once again done marks a special zman. Therefore, says the Rambam, what's the example? Could go in milas benoi, upidyan benoi. mevarach alea b'shas asiyah shechionu v'kiyamonu. So the Rambam is mechadish that there is a mitzvah which in and of itself is not motzui and todir. So we already see in the Rambam a Pesach for Rashi, but not yet fully, because whereas, as we'll see in the Rishonim, many Rishonim will be cholik on the Rambam by Milas V'noi and possibly by Pidin Aben, and the Rishonim may not have this concept of a mitzvah that is a mitzvah she'eino tadira ve'eino mitzuya b'choleis, and we'll see the Shechionu by Pidin Aben is a Gemara Mefureshes in Maseches Psachim, but we'll see it in the end of Arvei Psachim, but we'll see it's a machlokes how to understand what that bracha is. Machlokes HaRishonim, as we'll see Be'ez Hashem in momentarily. But the Rambam has a mitzvah which is not time-bound at all. For example, the mitzvah of Milah, which could come at any time. And there the Rambam says, because it's not Motzi and Todir, it's doime to a mitzvah she mizman lizman. Again, where's the makar for this Rambam? Pidyon haben, as we'll see, is a machlokes HaRishonim. Because the Rishonim will say that the reason why you make a bracha on Pidyon haben is because you have to wait shloshim yom for Pidyon haben. So it's a zman. Or it's a simcha that the child was yotze mechlal nefel, as we'll see in the Rishonim. So we don't have a Gemara Mefureshes that establishes this, that the Rambam says, that a mitzvah which is not todir and is not motzi b'chol eis is doimat the mitzvah shum yizman.
That's what Gemara Erevin, no?
That the Gemara says by Yom Tovim, where the Gemara says that given the osim yizman shemek shechionu, that's Yom Tovim, as an Osikalim will point out, and because those are fixed in zman.
These are all based on something, like on the spring time of the year, or Yom Tov, or something happening too.
Excellent. So let's see that now in Menachos. L'chayra Menachos. Why should we say that Menachos is a mitzvah she'eino tadira ve'eino mitzuya b'choleis? The Gemara in Masechta Kriso says that there was an amira that was makrib and osham tali b'chol yom. Can bring a carbon b'chol yom. So what is the Pesach for Rashi? Like you're saying, mitzvah she'eino mitzuya b'todir came as a result of an event. That event of a leda, which leads to Milah and Pidin Aben, is not Matzu, not Todir. But Lohikriv Mincha, Rashi says, Zeh Yomim Rabim. Why does that make it a Matzu and not Todir? So there's a dover nifla that's mevur in the Tshuvas Rambam. In Tshuvas Rambam Perador, the Rambam himself was asked to define the klolim of the brachas of Birchas Shechion. So Zot the Rambam, what's the klal? We have a Tosefta, says the Rambam, it's just copied immediately below the Rambam. We have a Tosefta at the end of Masechta Brachos, which says, Kol ha-mitzvahs mevarech aleim shigionu. On mitzvahs we make the bracha of shechionu. Ha'isa sukkah, lulav. Then the Brisa says, Ha'isa tzitzis la'atzmoi, ha'isa tefillin la'atzmoi. That's both a mitzvah, says the Rambam, that comes mizman l'zman. That's the first case of the Tosefta. The second case of the Tosefta is ha'oisa tzitzis and tefillin la'atzmai. So we have now in the Rambam, in the Tosefta, the first case of the Rambam, zman l'zman, and the second case of a mitzvah shekinyan loy.
Even though there's no time base on the
no time base. Now, zok the Rambam though, I have another Tosefta, and that Tosefta is the brisa that our Gemara brings. The Rambam now brings a Tosefta, and the Rambam says, Omar b'perek daled mi brachas, hoyom makriv zvachim b'Yerushalayim, and it's very important to note that this brisa brings even a carbon, whereas our brisa in the Gemara only talks about menachas. Zok the brisa, hoyom makriv zvachim b'Yerushalayim oimer berech shechionu, hoyom makriv karbonos oimer baruch shegionu, kshu makriv on oimer ha'asher kitshonu b'mitzvah tzivonu lahakriv. So Zot the Rambam, v'kvar mizboyer lecha, shehamitzvahs b'tchilas asiyoson yivarach shechionu. That Tosefta of our Gemara says, according to the Rambam, that whenever there is a tchilah for the kiyum mitzvah, wherever the mitzvah hasn't been done for a while, and there's a new tchilah, as though there's a new start for the kiyum mitzvah, and it's a vague term in the Rambam, we'll come to define it more exactly. The Rambam says, I see the third category in our Gemara. In other words, the Rambam read the Brisa and our Gemara exactly like Rashi. that we're speaking about the Yisrael was bringing the carbon, the mincha or the zavach. And because this is a new tchila, says the Rambam, of bringing a carbon, therefore there's a bracha of shechion. And then the Rambam summarizes, mitzvahs nichlokim legimel chalokim. And then the Rambam quotes the full language of the Rambam that we just saw in Hilchas Brachos. The proof that you make a bracha on tefillin is Shabira, and the word is Hamishna, but it shouldn't be Hamishna, it's Habraisa. Shabira, Habraisa, Mebirchas Azman, al tzitzis, and tefillin. So the two first categories of the Rambam, namely a mitzvah that comes mizman lizman, and tefillin and tzitzis is mefurish in the Tosefta in the end of Masechtas Brachos. Zot the Rambam, the hachelek hagimel, and the third category of mitzvah she'eino tedira, a mitzvah that's not common, that's not frequent. Ve'ein ha'odom masmid ba'asiyosa b'choleis. The person doesn't constantly do it. Ve'afilu sheloi tiyeh miyuchedes, even if it's not specifically associated bizman bezulas man acher, that you can only fulfill it in one zman and not in the other. Because the chiyuv isn't to bring it constantly. To damel mitzvah habo mizman lizman. Zot the Rambam locheni baruch aleh shechionu k'moishe bira habraisa b'makriv menachos v'karbanos. So the Rambam says our Gemara is the makar. So the Rambam learned like Rashi, and the Rambam says there's two conditions. First of all, that there isn't a chiyuv to constantly do it. There isn't a chiyuv to constantly bring menachos. V'oid, says the Rambam, that the odom hoil ve'eino tmidis achiyu ve'ein ha'odom masmid asiyosa b'choles. It's not something where the odom is constantly oiseh through zman. So eino tedir ve'eino mitzuyos, what the Rambam means that the oifen of the kiyum mitzvah means it doesn't occur betmidius. Doesn't occur betmidius. That means it is possible that a person could be makir b'chol yoim. But vibalt the chiyuv and the zman akiyum is not tmidis v'choleis. V'meila zot the Rambam, that's mechayv bracha of shechion. The makar is our brais. So ba'oifen that we understand that when the Rambam says that it's mila and pidin aben is lav dafka. It's not because an event happened, and it's not dafka because there was a later of a ben, or the ben was yotzim b'chal nefel by pidin aben. The makar is our braisa, adarabah. Mila is learned from the Bryce of Hayoim the Makir of Kabbanos B'Yerushalayim, where because the person is not Mechuyev Tamid, and the Rambam says the din is Ein Odom Masmid Ba'asiyosa B'Choleis, the person doesn't ordinarily bring it constantly, and even if he would choose to, there's nothing in the mitzvah itself that makes it be Masmid B'Choleis. Mela Zot the Rambam, there's a bracha of Shechion. What's the raya? Zot the Rambam, Commotion is Bayer B'Pidin Aben, Shavi Aben Mevorach Shtayim Asher Kitshonu and Shechion. So the Rambam says Pidin Aben would be another raya, but we see from the Rambam that Pidin Aben itself wouldn't necessarily be a proof. It's only our Tosefta of our Gemara that proves it. Why? Because as we mentioned, and we'll see in the Rishonim, Pidin Haben la'achar shloishim may have a Shechionu for a different reason. The reason for Shechionu la'achar shloishim by Pidin Haben may be because the child was Yotzim Echal Nefel, or because a Zman of Shloishim Yom passed. But Zot the Rambam, once I have the Bryce and our Gemara, that then says that a mitzvah that is not masmid basi also and is not mechuyev tamid is doime to a mitzvah that's bo mizman lizman. So we've established that according to both the Rambam and Tshuva and Rashi, we have in our Gemara a chidush in the bracha of Shechionu, that we don't necessarily need mizman lizman. We need something which is ein ha'odom masmid basi also ve'eino tmides achiv. Now, why is that mechayev shechionu? Why is that mechayev? So the lashon of the Rambam that we saw in the tshuva is the lashon of the Rambam is hamitzvos b'tchilas asiyoson yivarech shechionu. Dahainu, because the mitzvah is not tmidas achiyuv and is not masmid ba'asiyosa, so therefore when he now comes to be mekayim and or bring a mincha or a zevach, it's as though there's a new tchilah. It's a new opportunity to be mekayim a mitzvah that is not in any way connected to a constant kiyum of that mitzvah. So therefore, a mitzvah that's bo mizman lizman, that's a tchilas asiyah. It's a zman. It represents a tchilah, a new zman to be mekayim the mitzvah. A mitzvah she'enim masmid b'asiyasa means it doesn't mean that the possibility of the mitzvah is constant. We don't look at the possibility. We look at the frequency of the chiyuv and whether or not the person is masmid b'asiyasa. But mokum that he's not masmid basiyasa, that's considered zot the Rambam etchilas asiyah, as though he's been mekayim the mitzvah anew. So a new chayfetz to be mekayim the mitzvah with, tzitzis and tefillin, a new zman, or a mitzvah that's bo mizman lezman, where the opportunity to be mekayim the mitzvah is a new haschala. That's what's mavur in the Rambam in Tshuva, and that's the makor of the Rambam in HBrachos. So ba'oifen that we now is zoiche to shitas Rashi and shitas Rambam, that a mitzvah that's eino tediru bo mizman lezman is chayiv in shechion. Now, Rashi adds another condition, which is im lo yehevi menocha ze yomim rabim. According to the Rambam, what's the shear of how long has to elapse between one mitzvah to another if it's a mitzvah that's eino masmid basiyasa? The Rambam says mitzvah she'eino tedir ve'eino mitzuya b'choleis, where the Rambam says also being makriv zvachim and menachas b'Yushalayim is also eino masmid basiyasa. What happened if it came out that the person had to bring two menachas close by to each other for some reason, or he had to bring two zvachim close by? For example, Chas v'Shalom, he was shaving on Shabbos and had to bring two chatois, one Yom Rishon after the next. Or it came out that he was nizdam and chiyuv after he was oilo l'regel and he was makriv korban osef. Is there in Shitas Rambam a zman that has to elapse between the two? Milan Pidin Ben l'chayra has Tisha Yarchei Leida between the two, and Pidin Ben is unless he's nice. If he's nice in Isha Shniya, it's possible he can be Mekayim Pidin Ben closer. But we don't find in Shitas Rambam that there's a din of the length of time that has to elapse. According to the Rambam, the mitzvah itself, because it's Eino Tediru Mitzuya B'chol Eis, that itself means whenever there's an opportunity to be Mekayim it, it's called Haschalas Asiyasa. The Rambam doesn't seem to require a time to elapse. Rashi says Mefurish Yomim Rabim, and we don't have a definition of Yomim Rabim. We'll keep the Shaila open the while, and we'll see Behemshech possibly a definition in the Rishonim of Yomim Rabim. The Pella that we're now going to be oimed on in Shitas Rambam is the Rambam seems to be Seiser himself. The Rambam in Hilchas Tmidim Musafim, copied immediately below the Tshuvas Rambam, says the following din. We know from the Mishnah in Zvachim, in Menachos, in Perek Rabbi Shmuel, that the din is that the same way as there's an Isser of Chodosh Lehedyat, which the Tvua that grew from the Hakrovas HaOimer of the previous year, that wasn't Nishrash already before the Oimer. All the Tvua that grew that wasn't Nishrash before the Oimer has to wait for the matir of the Oimer in the next year. So Huadin Legabe Mikdosh, one cannot begin to be makriv menachas from the Tvua Chadosha until after the Hakrova of the Shtei Halechem on Shavuos. That's Gzes HaKosu. Krivchem Mincha Chadosha. Now, Zok the Rambam, the first mincha that comes from Chodosh, after the Hakrova of the Shtei Halechem, Haladik Halacha, which the Neise Kelim of the Rambam don't have a Mefurish Makar for. The Rambam says, "V'kol hamakriv mincha min hachodosh tchila mevarach shechionu." The first mincha brought after on Shavuos from mincha chadosha after that Hakrova of the Shtei Halechem is mechayev a bracha of shechionu. As I state in the Rambam. Where does that come from? Where's that din? So the Kesef Mishnah says the Rambam got it from our Gemara. Kol ha'oimed u'makriv menochas b'Yerushalayim oimer baruch shechionu. What's the case? Why is he making a shechionu on Akravas HaMincha? Zot the Rambam, you know what the case is? The case is that he's being makriv a mincha min hachodosh. And that's mechayev a bracha of shechionu. The Kesef Mishnah is just to the left of the Rambam that we just saw. Zot the Kesef Mishnah. Hochi mashma, this is how the Rambam understood. Behod the Tanya beperek ketzam levarchim hoya oimed umakriv menachas b'Yushalayim omer baruch shechionu udeloi kepirish Rashi udeloi ka'ataisus. So the Kesef Mishnah says we now have in the Rambam a whole different explanation of what Agemara is talking about. Very special case. That who are we talking about? We're talking about, first of all, it's a kohen who's being makriv a mincha which occurs once a year, right after we machadish that we bring from the menachas now from the Tvua Chadosha. The first mincha brought from the Tvua Chadosha deserves a shechion. Zot the Kesef Mishnah and Nayib Shach in the Gemara, not Rashi and not Taisus. Didn't see Taisus yet, but not Rashi and not Taisus. this etzem pshat of the Kesef Mishnah, that's how the Rambam learned the Gemara as a Pele, because we know how the Rambam learned the Gemara. The Rambam in Tshuva told us how he learned the Gemara. The Rambam is talking about a Yisrael who's being makriv, who wasn't makriv a mincha like Rashi, either liyomim rabim or because it's not togim. So it's a Pele. How could the Kesef Mishnah say that the Rambam learned our Gemara talking about the unique case of the first mincha that's brought min HaChadosh? The Rambam in Hilchos Brachos says that there's a mincha, a shechion on a mitzvah that's bo mizman lezman, and the Rambam in Tshuva says that the makor is from our brayso. So what are we talking about? Are we talking about a Yisrael being makriv a mincha because he doesn't bring one tadir? Or are we talking about a kohen making a shechion on a mincha that's bo min HaChadosh? What's the case? Here the Kesef Mishnah says, the loike Rashi or the loike HaTosfos. How to be miyashiv the Kesef Mishnah entirely is not clear. The Kesef Mishnah is very sossum. He says the loike Rashi or the loike HaTosfos. But perhaps we can, in order to be miyashiv the Kesef Mishnah, that the Rambam did see it from our Gemara, it would be to suggest the following. When we're makriv a mincha min HaChadosh, the first mincha that comes min HaChadosh, what's the shechionu for? Is the shechionu for the tuah? Like the same way as a pre-Chadosh, that's mischadesh mishana l'shana, we make a bracha of shechionu. So the first time in the mikdash we use tuah min HaChadosh, we make a bracha on the tuah. It's tuah min HaChadosh. L'chayra, that's not mistaber. Why should the tuah min HaChadosh be mechayev a bracha for the tuah? Not tuah chadasha. The tuah chadasha was already being eaten outside the Beis HaMikdash since the Akrava Sa'imah on Pesach. The tuah is not chadash. Elomai, it means that it's the use of the tuah chadasha l'mitzvah. That's what we're coming to make a shechion on. The hainu, the gzeres hakosuv is that we are maybe, the mitzvah is to be maybe shtei alechem, and the achash shtei alechem to begin the use of tuah chadasha b'mikdash. And in fact, the Sfasemis points out, and the Biskirov assumes the same way in the Chedushim and Menachos, that whereas the korban ha'omer, before it's brought, the chadash is osir ba'achila, in the case of the Beis HaMikdash, it's not that before that the tvua is osir lamizbeach, the chadash. It means that the gzeres hakosuv is that there is a seder, there's a way in which the tuah chadasha begins to be brought. First shtei alechem is brought, and after shtei alechem is brought, we then begin to bring tuah chadasha. Kum dechois, the shechionu is for the seder of bringing minchas min HaChadosh after the akrav of shtei alechem. It's a bracha on the mitzvah that was mischadish. So Zok the Rambam, the reason why makriv mincha min HaChadosh tchilim avarach shechionu is not because of the object. It's not the tvua chadasha that's like a new pre. It's because we are now being mekayim a mitzvah that's bo mizman lezman. There's a seder. La'achar the hava of the shtei alechem, but then makrib chadash b'mikdash, which is bo mizman lezman. So it's possible, even that what the Kesef Mishnah means is that the Rambam understood al derech Rashi that it was a mitzvah that's bo mizman lezman, and therefore since the tvua chadasha now is bo mizman lezman, that's the seder of the Havah b'mikdash. That after the hakrov of shtei alechem ba'atzeres, then we begin the hakrov of the tuah chadasha. So that mincha represents the tchila of the new seder of the bringing menachos min hachadash. Is memela, we make a bracha on that. That's a mitzvah. That's mischadish mizman lezman. So just as an aside to the olam, just for the chavibus of the shayla, there's a gzeres hakasuv that on Rosh Chodesh Nisan we begin to bring karbanos from the new truma of the lishka that came that year. Do we make a bracha of shechionu for the new behemoth, for the first carbon tzibur that's brought from the new truma salishka? Is that also something that's mischadesh mitruma chadasha? It's chadesh. It's to be mechadesh the truma v'hovei min hachadash. The ocean of the brayso. We are mechadesh the nesinas hashekel midei shana b'shana, and we don't bring mishtakod anymore. We bring dafka from shkolim chadashim. Do we find the Bircha Shechionu in the first carbon that's brought from Shkolim Chadashim?
It's not really a mitzvah. They have to do
Possibly. Possibly. Then we lose some of the yishuv for the, because I don't know, I don't think we have a raya that to bring a mincha min hachadash as a mitzvah. It's a seder that after we're carrying the mitzvah of being makriv min hachadash, we can then begin the seder of being makriv other menachas min hachadash. So I'm not sure. Karbanos maybe it's a mitzvah. So yesh lodun badov. But that al kaponim is a stira in Shittas Rambam. And the Kesef Mishnah, we have a stira in how the Rambam understood Al Gemara. Now, so far until this point, we have Shittas Rashi, that a mitzvah that's bom mizman lezman is Mechai v'Shechionu. We even if it's not specific to his man, im lohevi menocha ze yomim rabim. We have Shittas Rambam, a mitzvah that's eino tedira ve'eino mitzuya, which Rambam says a person isn't mechuyev todir ve'eino masmin basiyasa, is called tchilas asiya when it's done. What do the other Rishonim hold b'negea to this chiddush of Tosfos and Tosfos Rashi? So, but immediately below the Kesef Mishnah is copied a Tosfos in Menachos. Tosfos in Menachos, if we look one line before the lines widen. For HaRav Rabbeinu Shmaya, Tosfos quotes Rabbeinu Shmaya. Was halt Rabbeinu Shmaya? Purish HBrachos, the dafka b'menachos, lefi she'ein regilim lehisnadev menachos. Tosfos gives us an inkling why menachos dafka are not called a mitzvah that a person brings todeh. We ask how a person can be bringing karbanos as frequently as he wants. The Tana that brought an Osham Toli B'chol Yom. So Tosfos tries to answer that by saying, because menachos ein regilim lisnadev menachos. Mincha is a carbon only. If a person wants to be menadev something in the Mishkan, he'll try to be menadev something that's muvchar. So what will he be menadev? He'll be menadev a behema. So therefore, menachos are not regilim lihisnadev. So therefore, they are brought less todir. So now we have Rabbeinu Shmaya also seeming to agree with Tosfos, with the Rambam, and Rashi, that something that's not rogil in the lashon of the Rambam, it's not masmid ba'asiyosoi, is mechai v'shechion. Azoi steht in Rabbeinu Shmaya. The dafka b'menachos lefi she'ein regilim lisnadev menachos. Zok Tosfos v'ef shaloi makein. The b'tosefta ktani hochenami gabe zevach. When we saw the Rambam quoted the Tosefta says, Hoyomakriv Zevach Yerushalayim. He makes a brach of Shechianu. Vais dechoy zok Tosfos. The klal is nothing to do with menachos because it's not regilim nisnadev, because the same thing is true with Zvachim. Now, does that mean that Tosfos disagrees completely with Rabbeinu Shmaya? What does Tosfos hold about this klal of a mitzvah that's bom mizman lezman? What's Tosfos sheet about that? So if we go back to page 6 of the Maramakomis in the Maramakomis booklets, and look on the Tosfos Dibra Maskel Hoya Oimedu Makriv. You go back to the Gemara in Bרכot itself. Tosfos Dibra Maskel Hoya Oimedu Makriv Menachos. Tosfos, in the very last 2 lines of Tosfos, quotes Rashi in Masechta Menachos. Zok Tosfos, Veloy, I disagree with Rashi. Veloy kipirish Rashi de Menachos, de Mayri bekoyen shaloy hikriv me oilam. So Tosfos says that Rashi in Menachos, Tosfos brings a lot of Rashi in Menachos, that we're talking about a kohen who was never makriv. First time you come to do a mitzvah. So Tosfos, that's not mechayev shechion. Why? Because it's not a mitzvah that's bom mizman lezman. So Zok Tosfos, even if you never have did the mitzvah, and it's the first time that you're doing the mitzvah, Zok Tosfos, there's no din that you have to make a brach of shechion. Tosfos says the klal is, if we look a line before, kiven sheyesh lehem zman kovua mevarchim shechionu. The tanai of shechionu has to be zman kovua. V'loy kipirish Rashi. Now we'll come back to Rashi's pshat, b'negea to the mitzvah that a person is doing for the first time. But Tosfos is loshen that when he argues on Rashi and says that even if someone will have done the mitzvah, it's the first time someone's doing the mitzvah, and we'll come back to this din. We haven't discussed this case yet. So far, we're discussing just a mitzvah that hasn't been done for a long time. Now we're talking about a case where the mitzvah was never been done. But Tosfos, when he disagrees with Rashi, says that the klal always for shechionu is mizman lazman, constant time. Any mitzvah which is not specific to a zman never has a bracha of shechionu. So seemingly the lashon of Tosfos is that Tosfos would disagree with Rabbeinu Shmaya, Tosfos would disagree with Rashi, Tosfos would disagree for the Rambam, that there's no mechayev of shechionu unless the mitzvah is bar mizman l'zman. The question then is, now that we'll start being oimed on Shitzat Tosfos, and we alluded to this a couple of times before, what will Tosfos do with the Gemara Mefureshes by Pidin Haben? So we mentioned already two possibilities, Yitzia Mechal Nefel and Shloshim Yoim. Now we'll see more in detail in the Rishonim how we'll solve the kasha from the Gemara by Pidin Haben. So first, again, to see a summary of Shitzat Tosfos a little bit more in detail, if you go back to the Maramakomis pages on page 1 of the loose of the sheets, top left is a copy of the Tosfos in Sukkah and Daf Mem Vav. So Tosfos in asks a number of questions. Tzarich l'farish, ma'ishno the yes mitzvah tiknu levarach shechionu v'yesh mitzvah shaloi tiknu. Tosfos asks then a series of shaylas. Now, if we go down in Tosfos, about halfway down the Tosfos, at the line begins nami loy mevarech, and we'll begin from the words v'chein. V'chein apidin haben mevarech shechionu. Tosfos has that Gemara. Kidi iso besoif perek arvei psochim. V'ilu amila loy mevarech. For bris milah, you don't make a bracha. Now, if, according to the Rambam, a mitzvah that's made because it's einoi todir and eino mitzuya b'choles, the Rambam told us mufurish that therefore you make a bracha of shechionu on both milah and pidin haben. Tosfos says milah, I have a rye from a Gemara that you don't, and pidin haben you do. What's the chilek? So we see in Tosfos 2 points. First of all, Tosfos has a mufurish Gemara that on pidin haben you make a bracha, but on milah we don't have. So Tosfos then goes on to prove that by milah you don't make a bracha of shechionu. So Tosfos says v'nireh. If you just go down a little further in Tosfos, 6 lines up from the end of the dibur, Tosfos says v'nireh. The mitzvah sheyesh aleh simcha, a mitzvah which involves simcha, tiknu shechionu. U'de'amrinon b'haroya de'mevarech al kelim chadashim. Tosfos says that you make a bracha for kelim chadashim. Kosher v'b'shira de'loi samchin Allah. De'beperek kol ma'arvin de'bo'inon midi de'osi mizman l'zman v'kosher mipidin haben. The klal has to be that it's a mitzvah sheyesh bo simcha. That's one condition. Meila, Tosfos says that explains why by certain mitzvahs that don't involve simcha, we don't make a bracha. That will explain the mitzvah of milah, say the Rishonim, because it's tzar v'yanuka. Zok Tosfos, but the Gemara that says that when mevarech al kelim chadashim on a new baged, Zok Tosfos, we don't hold like that Gemara. Why? Because there's no specific time that buying a kli chadash is associated with. Bishloim, the Gemara in Eruvin that says that when you see the new pre, that's because it marks the seasons. It's the new season of the pre. But Zok Tosfos, a kli chadash is not mizman l'zman. So Tosfos again is betoikef, like he is in our sugya, that the bracha of shechionu depends on something that's osi mizman l'zman. Zok Tosfos, the kosher mipidin haben. This doesn't have an answer for kosher. So to answer the shaila from Pidin Haben, if you now look on page 2 of the Maramakomis, copied on the top right, is a ran in Sukkah. The ran quotes the Tosfos, and the ran says 3 lines before the beginning of the wide lines. Avaloi piresh. Tosfos doesn't give us a clear rule. What the difference is, why some have a bracha of shechionu and some don't. Zok Tosfos v'li nireh the shechionu gemitzvos bizman tolu. The britz of shechionu does depend on zman. So we need, even according to the Ran, osi mizman lezman. Where do we see that? Kudemuchach b'soif perek kol ma'arvim, where the Gemara says yom tov kevan de mizman lezman ka'osi. Hilkoch says the Ran, Sukkah, Lulav, Mikra Megillah, Mizman Lezman. So that means the Ran is now accepting Tosfos' premise that the basic condition for Birchas Shehecheyanu is something which comes fixed by time. I Pidyon Haben. So the Ran says like this. Upidyon Haben, which Tosfos left unresolved, Afal Gav de Lav Mizman Lizman Ka'asi, Afilu Hochi Kiven Shi Mitzvah Tluya Bizman Lamed Yom Shaltinik, Sheyotza Mechlal Nefel V'nichnas Lechlal Kayoma V'chiyuz, Shaper Shayach Leveruche Be'Shecheyanu. Now, the Ran is vague. What does the Ran mean? So Rabbi Yosef was suggesting that it's man, because Shloshim Yom had to elapse. So what it means is a child is noilad, and we make a shechiyonu for the later, and now it's mizman lizman that la'achar lamed yom, now the child is roy leiled. The question then is, so then why did the Ran have to add that sheyotzam michlal nefel v'nichnas l'chal kayoma v'chiyus?
Because without that, it's stam no mitzvah.
Why do we need that? The Gzeres HaKosov is that we need Shloshim Yom. Do we have a question that the reason why we make a Shechiyonu by Sukkot is because it's Chag HaOsif? Do we need an explanation for that Gzeres HaKosov? The fact is, it's a mitzvah that's Bo Mizman Lezman. So if the Ran has been mechadish that the mitzvah requires Shloshim Yom, so that's all he needs to say. We required Shloshim Yom till apps. Why then does the Ran have to add his Yotz Mechal Nefel? Why not? Oh, excellent. Excellent. Now, I just want to bavorn before I come to answer your shayla. The intim tzalomer, which I think that some of the Olam wants to suggest, that what the Ran really means is that it's the simcha that it was Yotzim Mechal Nefel. It's a different din. It's like a shechiyonu of, let's say, roya es chaveroi, or the shechiyonu for the leder. So then why did the Ran have to mention Lamed Yom? Why mention Lamed Yom? So there's a dover nifla, a beer nifla.
Mitzvahs don't have simcha also.
I'm sorry?
Mitzvahs could have simcha.
Mitzvahs could have, but the Ran needs man as man. Shlomo, the Ran himself was medayik the Gemara in Eruvin, which we mentioned before, that we need zman l'zman by mitzvahs, the same as we need zman l'zman for Yom Tov. That was the Ran that the Ran said. Elamai. So Zot the Binyan Tzion Azay. There's a tshuva from the Binyan Tzion in Siman Kuv Zayin, where the Soich Dvar the Binyan Tzion says, I'll just read out the lashon briefly. It's not included in the Mar Makaymus. Just read out the lashon briefly. He says, and this is the answer that you gave. He's bothered by that Mila also is la'achar ches yomim. So we should make a shechiyonu for Mila because it's also mizman lizman. We made a shechiyonu on the leder, make a shechiyonu after ches yomim. Is there some din that ches yomim yes and lamed yomim ches yomim is not enough and lamed yomim yes? So Zot the Binyan Tzion, that's what the Ran means. He says we find a Gemara in Brachos in the end of in HaRav. HaRav es chaveroi milamed yomim liyamed yomim mevarech shechiyonu. Why? Because lamed yomim is his man. That Hashim and Lamisa, Chas v'Shalom. Zok the Ran, the Binyan Tzion, that's what the Ran means. That since in the Lamed Yom we're coming to determine if the child's a Nefel, Lamed Yom is his man, that we should be Choshesh to Misa. So therefore you're making the bracha of Lamed Yom because that Lamed Yom is significant. It's not just Osim is man Lizman, it's the significance of this man. Otherwise we should make it by this man Lizman of Mila. The Tet says this man Lizman the Mila, that Zman doesn't represent any significance. You just have to wait. Not every mizman lizman represents a chidush and a chidush. The Lamed Yom that passed Zot the Binyan Tzion is this man that we have been choshesh l'misa. That's not mechayev bracha. That's a bir nifla. That's mavur in Binyan Tzion. So ba'ofen that we now have one yishuv for the Gemara of Pidyon Haben, and that is mizman lizman because Lamed Yom is a chashash of mis. The significance of Lamed Yom is the shear of Royas Chaver Lamed Yom. So we could possibly suggest that we had asked in the Rambam, where the Rambam doesn't seem to give us a clear indication of how much time has to elapse between Mitzvah She'enam to Diriyos, and Rashi says, Ze Yomim Rabin, perhaps we could suggest that this man would be Lamed Yom. Lamed Yom is this man of the Chidush of Zman. That's what we see in the Rambam. That's one possible yishuv. Another possible Eight Selishik Satesis is to say that we don't need Dafka Zman Lamed Yom. The Yitzia Mechlal Nefel itself is a Siba for Simcha. Just the same as Royas Chaveroi or the Leda of the Tinnik. So who adin, the fact that the child is Yotz Mechal Nefel is itself a Siba for Simcha. That's what we could suggest. seemingly the point that we've arrived at in Tesis is that unless a mitzvah is bol mizman lezman, shitas haTesis and the Ran, deloy Rashi, deloy Rambam, deloy Rabbeinu Yishmael, there's no mechayev of a bracha of shechion. Now we come to a chiddush nifla, which is the chiddush of the Tuas Shoyer, a machlokes between the Tuas Shoyer and the Shach, and is a nidin which has broad nafkiminas ladina. We saw in the Tosfos in Masechta HaBrachos, we just learned the Tosfos. And Tosfos at the end brings a shita of Rashi that we're not talking about a Yisrael bringing a mincha who hasn't been makriv a korban for a while. What was the lashon Tosfos? The mari b'koyen shalei hikriv me'olam. We're talking about a kohen who's doing avodah for the very first time. So just briefly, Rabbi said, to summarize how many pshatim so far we have in this one line of a brayso of how many pshatim do we have in the Rishonim so far? Rabbeinu Shmaya and Rashi that it's menachas that he's not makriv tadir. The Rambam in Tshuva zvachim and menachas because you're not makriv tadir. Shitas HaTosfos in the Gemara we didn't see it, but now we have another possibility in Rashi, a kohen who was never makriv. Kohen shall hikriv me'olam. On that we saw lashon Tosfos is Tosfos chelik b'toikev, and Tosfos says that kol zman that it isn't a mitzvah bol mizman lezman, there's no bracha of shechion. Aber was steht in Rashi? Not just do we have shitas Rashi in our sugya that a mitzvah that's not told there is mechayev b'shechionu, but we have another chiddush in Rashi that the very first time someone's mekayim a mitzvah, you make a shechionu for being mekayim the mitzvah for the first time. Haladik Rashi. Where is that? It's a Rashi that Tosfos brings in Brachos on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. It's the Makar is a Rashi Menachos Daf Ayin Hey. It's on the first page of the Mara Makomis at the bottom. Kugoyin shaloi hikriv koyin ze adayin mincha miyom. That Rashi in Masechta Menachos. When shaloi hikriv koyin ze mincha miyom. Murdik. Places the Chor we will understand should be chayil from that. Why? Because it's not bol mizman lezman. The fact that for this person, it's the first time he was Mekayim mitzvah. Zolzai. But it's not bol mizman lezman. What's the dina? What's the halacha? First time someone comes to you Mekayim mitzvah, he was never Mekayim in his life. He makes a shechion or he doesn't make a shechion. What's the dina? What's the halacha? You look on page 2 of the Mara Makomis, bottom left. There's copied a psak of the Ramah in the halacha in Hilchas Shchita. Zok the Ramah. Misha shochat pam harishon. Someone who is performing shchita for the very first time. Mivorech shechionu ala kisui, avaloy ala shchita, de mazik lebria. Shchita is taking away chiyus. The concept of mazik, it doesn't mean because it's cruelty to the behemoth. Mazik means because we decreased its value.
Because of what?
We decreased its value. It's a sugya mefureshes in Masechta Chulin Daf Yudalad. That taste, I'm sorry, it's a sugya mefureshes on Daf Ches. The taste is in Daf Ches, based on, and it's based on a sugya later, where Tosfos says that Tosfos discusses what benefit someone gains from being sheikh to behema. Why is it a tikkun on Shabbos? Because overall the behema loses its value. Because the behema, the Gemara Rashi says in Psachim is a medes la avoida. It's a medes. It's a medes la kamata.
But you get Sudas Yantiv.
So this is the nidin because the yisoidoi. It's mazik labriya. It's mazik labriya. You are being makrish something. Kum dechoy state in the Ramah that the first time someone comes to Mekayim the bracha of kisui hadam, he makes a bracha. I'm showing how we define it.
It's 10-1.
As I state in Ramah, where's the makar of this Ramah? So the Shach, immediately to the left of the Ramah, says, Zel Shon Hagoyis min Hogim Shehivi Bedarchi Moshe. The kisui have a mitzvah. Kisui is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to be mechasadam. It's not just a chetimtza that to be going with the ma'aseh shchita. It's considered a mitzvah. Kidarminon b'schus she'omer Avram v'anoichi offer v'efer zochu bonom l'shnei mitzvahs. It's a comparison to which cases? To tzitzis and sukkah. Now, sukkah is a mitzvah that's bol mizman l'zman. What's tzitzis? Tzitzis, the Rambam says, a klal that whenever it's a mitzvah involves an object, and the object is renewed, a person gets a new beged, that's a chiddush in the mitzvah, Mela makes a bracha of shechion. So zogt the Hagoysim in Hogim. This is also a chiddush in mitzvah. You'll be mekayim a mitzvah that you were never mekayim before. Ein lecha chiddush gadol mizeh, that for you this mitzvah is a chiddush. Zman is a chiddush. An object is a chiddush, and a mitzvah you're mekayim for the first time is a chiddush. And Memele zotim in Hogim, we have it. So first, the Shach asks that lahalacha we don't paskin that way. We don't paskin like the Rambam by tzitzis. We only paskin that we make a bracha on tzitzis if a person buys a new beged, new talis, so then he makes it on the beged, but not on the asiyas hamitzvah. That's the first question in the Shach. Then the Shach discusses that there's a concept of simcha. Not because you were Makai in the mitzvah first time, but just in the wide lines where the wide lines of the Shach begin, just below the faint underline, it says maybe there's a simcha. Zok the Shach that no, that's not Mechayev. Why? Because the Gemara says, if you go down about 4 lines further in the Shach, because Zochu Bono l'shnei mitzvahs l'chut shel tcheles ritzua shel tefillin. We were zeicha to other mitzvahs also, tefillin and tzitzis, which we don't make a shechionu on. But Rabbi said, just as an aside, this is such a chizuk in the simcha that we should have bisman kiyum tzitzis and tefillin. The Shach has to be marich to say that simcha is not mechayev shechionu, but a mitzvah that we were zeicha to b'schus avos, shteit in Shach should be mechayev simcha. It's a different darg of mitzvah. As I shteit in Shach. But what's negeh for our sugya is to see further. Is where the Shach brings the rekeach. Zok der hazay. Umatsosi barikeach simin shin ayin aleph. Shekosa b'shem ribok mishpira. Kol mitzvah shala odom laso is v'lo yasa. Any mitzvah that a person is a chiyuv to do, v'lo yasa, and he didn't do it yet. Umischanech lichatchila. He's being initiated into the mitzvah for the very first time. We ordinarily associate chinuch with a koton, but there's a minchas chinuch of a kohen gadol. There's a concept of chinuch of beginning the initiation into a mitzvah. Zoktesis a gadol who's zoterikech, a gadol who's mekayim a mitzvah for the first time is considered being nischanich in a mitzvah. Nifla. Zokter inauguration. Where's the makor? Midamrin on the menachas hoyoyim we do makar menachas b'Yerushalayim oy meshechionu shenischanech la'avodas hazman ad kan l'shoynoi. So the rekeach learned like Rashi that it's in menachas that place is chaylik that a case where the person is being nischanech l'mitzvah that is mechayev bracha of shechionu nifla. The lashon of the rekeach is copied on the top left of the page. Shechionu, Rabbeinu Yevok Mishpira. Kol mitzvah shezmana kavua. Either a mitzvah that zman is kavua. Oy kol mitzvah shala odom lases v'lo yaso umischanech lechatchila tzorach levarach shechionu. Where's that from? Ubeperek menachas nikimotzois. Ubebrachas beperek ketzal mevarach.
Screen share, please.
Oy medu makir menachas b'Yerushalayim oy meshechionu shenischanech la'avodas hazman. Now, if time allows, we'll come back to the oyster of the rekeach, why a cotton doesn't make shechionu for all the mitzvahs that he starts being mekayim immediately when he becomes a gadol. That's a discussion in the rekeach further. But Zot Rashi, a gadol who's been nischanech l'mitzvah, this man Rishon, makes a bracha shechionu.
So chatchila, mischanech chatchila,
we'll come to
is once a lifetime.
We'll come to once a lifetime. Correct. Nischanech l'mitzvah l'chatchila, once a lifetime. As I state in Rashi Menachos. Makir in the lashon Rashi Menachos that we saw before. The precise lashon Rashi is Shaloi hikriv kohen ze adayin mincha miyomov. As I state in Rashi. So the Zot Shach the efshal ze somchul levarach bekisui. Aval tzorich yun lefizeh, and this is the shaila that you just asked. Amai Eloi mevarchim betzitzis utfilin v'shar mitzvah shem eschanchim behu. Why do we make a bracha for the first time that we're mekayim? V'chein al mezuzah kiddushay isha. El al karchol zot the Shach svirle dafilu b'mitzvah shem eschanchim ba ein mevarach shechianu kol zman kol she'ein zman hakavua ukadat ha'toisves v'haran v'harash v'hanal. Himoishe kosav ha'toisves v'harash b'perek ketzal mevarchim. The Shach says that in first places. that even a mitzvah that's Eino Mekayim Miyomov, Tosfos says you don't make a Shechianu. Why? Because you need a mitzvah that's Bo, Mizman Lizman. So we now have a second machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos, and it may possibly be again the Shitosam. Tosfos consistently needs Mizman Lizman, therefore a mitzvah she'ena tedira and Eino Mitzuya is not Mekayim Shechianu. Hidin Aben Lamed Yoim or Yitzir Mechalme. Then Rashi has l'shitosoi that there's another oifen which is called a chidush in asiyas mitzvah. And Zot Rashi, what's that chidush b'asiyas mitzvah? That chidush b'asiyas mitzvah is you were never mekayim yomov. Of them Zot Tosfos right, it's not a mitzvah b'om mizman lizman. So Ledina, the shach is being choylek on the Ramah. Because he says, enochanami, we clearly have a rekeach that holds like the Ramah, but Tosfos, the Rashba, are all choylek Rashi. So if the makor of the Rekeach was from our Gemara of Ha'ya'im D'Makim Menachos V'Yushalayim and Tosfos and the Gdoli Harishonim Achaylik, which means we need a mitzvah that's Bo Mizman Lizman. And Zok the Shach, I'll show you that we paskin that you need a mitzvah Bo Mizman Lizman because on tzitzis you don't make a bracha except if you buy a new beged and then you're making the bracha on the beged. So Zok the Shach, we need a mitzvah that's Bo Mizman Lizman. So how could there are more paskin that the first time that you mechayev Kiti Adam you make a bracha? As I frek. As I frek the shach. Just in the time that we have, we'll see a chidush nifla that's mavur in the Sefer Tuas Shor on the shach. 2 chidushim, 2 points, and these are central to the sugya here. So on page 3 of the Mara Mekaymis, the next page of the Mara Mekaymis, top right. Zok the Tuas Shor, Shapir Samchinun al Das Rashi. The Ramah has a right to paskin like Rashi. That what? The kol mitzvah she'oda mischanech ba l'tchila mevarach shechion. The shach asked from tzitzis and tefillin, the shaila that you were asking, that we don't make a bracha the first time we put on tefillin, and we don't make a bracha on tzitzis just because for the first time we put on tzitzis, and hu adin, we don't make a bracha just because we were mechadish the beged. Zok the Tuas Shor yesh li yashiv. Why? Kevon the kaimel on the cotton hayoidea lisatev oviv chayiv lechanche betzitzis became cotton hayoidea lishmar tefilov oviv chayiv liknois le tefillin became noagu k'mashikosav hachreinim zalsham. Zok there, when he becomes a gadol, he was already melumad to be to wear tzitzis and to put on tefillin. So it's not a chinuch begadlus. Therefore, he's not now being mischanech in the mitzvah, as I zok the Tuas Shor. The imkain zok there, emas yivarach shechionu. When should the shechionu be? I b'shas levisha rishono loy tiknu chazal chiyuva ledardeki k'mesha kosa perik arbe psachim. It's mitzad mitzvah chinuch. It's not mitzad ikr chayvas mitzvah. Va'acha shenasu b'nei yud gimel hay shaito lav shas chinuchi shari kvar nischanech bo bekatnusay. Murder kechidush of the Tuas Shor. Now, the shaila which I think Rav Shlomo was hinting at is that the Tuas Shor is tamua. So what if he was nischanech ba bekatnusa? That's a din d'Rabbanan. Now he's been mekayim d'Oraisa. Of course, he's recording in progress. The first time he's been mekayim mitzvah d'Oraisa. What? Why shouldn't he make a bracha? But just first the firais. So what does it mean that he was makriv menachos for the very first time in Yomov? So Zot the Tuas Shor, because a kohen before he's nischanech la'avodah, the sugya in Masech Chulin, that it takes gadlus, we don't allow him to do avodah before that. So that's an instance of where he was never mekayim yet the mitzvah b'teiras chinuch, therefore he can make a bracha. For Zois, afilu lekotem mechanchim lasis mezuzah lepischoi, mashenkim b'menachos eimanichim lasei v'chein bekisi u'shchita, even though a cotton can shecht, mikomokim milsad le'shchichi yishiyadei la'aminis yadav. It's not common that you should be able to do it. So Zot the Tuas Shor, a mitzvah that he was likely to have encountered bekatnos, we don't make a bracha of shechianu on. The pella is it's a mitzvah d'oraisa. Let's continue in the Tuas Shor, and we'll see that what will emerge from the Tuas Shor is a basic nidin how to understand what the mechayiv of shechianu would be for a mitzvah that you mekayim the first time. Zot the shechianu, zot the Tuas Shor azay, and this is negei ledin. We're coming to paskin like the Ramah. He says the shach finished his argument against the Ramah by saying, Enochanami, the Ramah's a Rekeach, the Ramah's a Rashi. But Tosfos says it's only a mitzvah mibal mizman lezman, and as I state in the Ran in Sukkah, and as I state in the Rashba in Brachos, and all the Rishonim, the Loiki Rashi, that we need a mitzvah that's bal mizman lezman. And Shitzer Rambam is when we don't hold like. Zok the Tuashah, that's not true. Tosfos never meant to argue on Rashi for that reason. Tosfos agrees with Rashi that a mitzvah that you're makayim the first time you make a bracha on. He says, Oy nirlan use deities of the Tuashah in the next paragraph, the lekker man the polygar Rashi v'rekech. Ladina. The Afagab the Nechliku Tosfos apirish Rashi b'Menachos shekosa the Mishal also mitzvah me'olam loy mevarech, and Tosfos says it's not true. Zok Tosfos, Zok the Tuashah, I'll prove to you that Tosfos agrees with Rashi. Why? Because what's Tosfos' own pshat in the sugya? By saying, if you can just keep a cheshbon of the pshatim that we've had in the sugya, what's Tosfos' own pshat in the sugya? Just for a moment, and this we'll finish this chelik of the limud. Let's go back one more time to page 6 in the Maramakaim's book. Tosfos' own pshat in the sugya. Tosfos says, and this is Negel Ledina Rabbi Sai in Shulchan Aruch. Tosfos says, what's the case? V'nireh, the case is Chof Daled Mishmaras Hoyu. There were 24 Mishmaras. V'kol Shabbos Mishchadeshes Mishmara Acheres. Im Kein Kol Mishmara Eina Mishameres Ala Beis Pa'amim Bashana. V'kiven Sheyesh Lo Zman Kavua Mevarchim Shechion. So Tosfos, each mishmar gets twice a year to go to the Beis Hamikdash and do avodah. So Tosfos, twice a year,
2 days a week,
is kavua. Twice a year is kavua leizman. Is memele each time the mishmar comes back, and the mishmar starts avodah, the kohen makes a shechion. That's Tosfos pshat nesugya. Zok the Tuashah, I don't understand. Something which you do twice a year, you make a shechion one. But something that you do once in your life, you're not going to make a shechion one. As they fact the Tuashah. So he says, Madoch, we're willing to consider that it's the chidush of shtei pa'amim bashana. So a chidush of once in your life, avada should be mechayev a bracha of shechion. As they state in Tuashah. Now, in the pshat of Tosfos, the Tuashah is a pella, and we'll leave the shaila for the moment for the ilum to be ma'ayinin. The pshat's a pellet. Tosfos says why you make a bracha, because it's ba mizman lezman. Masha'enkin, something that you makayim for the first time in life, is not ba mizman lezman. Elomai, why is it mistaber that there should be more chidush in something twice a year? So if the Olam can see in Be'ez Hashem, and perhaps we'll come back to it in the later limud, on the first page of the Maramakaim's bottom left, there's copied in Mogen Avram and a Bor Heitev b'Shem Liad Aaron that discuss at length this chiddush that it says in Tosfos that twice a year is also a chiddush. Fine, that's stated in Tosfos, but it has to be kavua leizman. But let's for the moment assume the understanding of the Tuashah. It's not the Tuashah. If Tosfos agrees that a chiddush is even something that occurs twice a year, so once a lifetime shouldn't be a chiddush. Elomai, why does Tosfos argue with Rashi? Because Tosfos doesn't like the pshat in the Braisa. Hoyo oimed to mean that it means the very first time in your life. Doesn't say that anywhere in the Braisa. Hoyoim means he's doing it. It says it anywhere in the Braisa for the first time. Steht nicht in the Braisa. So Tosfos in Pshat didn't want to learn like Rashi, but in Din, Tosfos is masking. As is not the Tuashah. What do we have from the Tuashah? That the Tuashah understands the Loik HaShach, that the Betzem, Tosfos, and the other Rishonim are not arguing on Rashi. And Kavua Leizman just represents a Chiddush of Zman. And Luyitzui, it's the first time in life. Of course, that's a Chiddush in Zman. Tosfos just doesn't like Rashi's pshat mitzad the loshon of the Braisa. You felt Tosfos there types in the Braisa as they state in Tuashah weiter. Fine. But what do we see in Tuashah? The Tuashah understood that the first time a person's mekayim a mitzvah, what's the mechayev of shechionu? Because of zman. It's a kol shekain from something that comes twice a year. Kol shekain something that
once a lifetime,
for the first time in a lifetime. Kiddush in zman. So what's the swar of the Shach? Why does the Shach disagree with that? The answer is because if we look carefully in the lashon of the Rekeach, how does the Rekeach explain why for the first time someone's been mekayim a mitzvah, first time in the life, b'yomov, you should make a bracha? What's the lashon of the Rekeach? Mitzvah shal odom la'asoiso u'mischanech lechatchila.
Top of page 2.
Has been mechadish to us a concept in Shechionu
Top of page
that
2.
the Odom is being mischanech. What does that mean? It's not because the mitzvah came for the first time. It's not mizman l'zman. It's not a chidush in asiyas mitzvah. It's a chidush in the Odom. The Odom has been mischanech to something. There's a chidush in the Odom himself. The Tuas Shoyer understands that the mechayiv of a first time in a lifetime is because it's man. It's a chidush. That's not the Yesod. Our Gemara is a makor for a new din called being mischanech lemitzvah. The Odom there's a chidush in the Odom. The Odom is being mischanech. That chidush of the Odom being mischanech is mechayiv shechionu. And it has no parallel to any sugya in Shas, Zot Rekech, besides Brachas Lamed Zayin and Beis. Pidin Haben is not the Odom being mischanech. That's a mitzvah. That's Bo Mizman Lizman, according to the Rambam. Or Yotzim Chal Nefel, or Shloshim Yoim, however we want to say. Zot Rekech, I have one sugya in Shas. This and the sugya Menachos, which is the same Gemara. That's mechadesh the din of Shechionu, where the Odom is being mischanech. Zok the Shach, then of course Tesis argues with that. Because Tesis doesn't have a concept of Odom being mischanech. Tesis has a mitzvah that's ba, mizman l'zman. The Tuashor says the reason why an Odom was mekayim a mitzvah first time is because it's like a chiddush in zman. So he says, madoch, if it's ba shtepam, and that's a chiddush, kol sheken, it's a chiddush for the first time in the person's life. But Zok the Shach, nish doch shteit in Rekech. That's not what you take out of our Gemara. What you take out of the Gemara is Odom being mischanech. Of them, Tesis, Odom being mischanech? No such thing. No such Gemara. The only thing we can take out of the Gemara is Shtei Mishmaras. What's Shtei Mishmaras? Pamayim Bashana. And in that, we'll just end with this, and that it's Kedai, just to be oimed, as we mentioned briefly on the first page of the Maramakim, is bottom left. There's a machloikis between the Mogen Avram and the Yad Aron. If we can extend this to a peri that has two harvests a year. The Mogen Avram says that the reason why you can make a bracha on 2 harvests is a Tosfos. Mishmara shtei pamim. It's not the Yad Aron. Tosfos is about mitzvahs. A mitzvah that's mischadesh mizman l'zman. The mishmar kavua that came each time is a chiddush in the mitzvah. In Paris, shtei pamim b'shana is not zman l'zman. It's dafka by mitzvahs Tosfos was mechadesh that it's osim mizman l'zman. It's a chiddush in mitzvah, but not that pamayim b'shana is man. Machlokes nifla, which we know that we'll perhaps have a chance to come back to. Machlokes between the Yad Aron and the Mogen Avram. Simple teich in what it says in places of Shtei Pa'om Hashan. So Rabbi, just to summarize, we began with the shita of Rashi that we're speaking about the Yisrael who's bringing a mincha, and in Tosefta it says that Tuadin by a carbon shalehebi menochas yomim rabim. Yomim rabim we were possibly suggesting based on the Bin Tzion maybe shloshim yoim, and lohevi is al derech the Rambam and al derech Rabbeinu Shmaya and Tesis and Menachos. That a mitzvah which is eina tadira ve'eina mitzuy, even if the person could be mekayim it, if it's not motzi and tadir, then the person is b'bircha shechianu. We are medayek in Tesis in brachos and kipshuta in Tesis in sukkah and in the Ran that it requires mitzvah that's ba mizman l'zman of a zman kavua. Tesis in sukkah remains b'tzorach from pidin haben, and the Ran says pidin haben is because of the zman of shloshim yoim, as the Binyan Tzion explains, because it's the zman of chashina lemisa, like by royes chaverei. Then we went on to mention the Shittas Rishonim that Pidin Haben may be because of Yotzim Chal Nefel. We then discussed the machlokes between the Shach and the Ramah, and the first time someone's Makai in the midst of Kisei Adam, does one make a bracha? The Tuashar says it should be a kol sheken from Shtei Pa'om and Bashama, and we're suggesting based on the Shach's reading of the Rekeach that the Mechayiv of Pam Achas is not because of Zman, first time in life, because of a concept that the Rekeach was Mechadish, called the Odom be Mischanech LaMitzvah. Ledina Rabbi say when a Bar Mitzvah Bacher lays tefillin for the first time, since he, according to the Tuashar, he already started tefillin before, the minig is not to make a bracha. What about those who have the minig that the first time he makes the bracha is his boy vayom? So if one's medayik the lashon of the Tuashar, it's mashma that since it's rogel to be mechanech, even if Yiva Meiser didn't do it, because he says shchita, it's not rogel to be mechanech, even though you could. Kisei Adam is not rogel to be mechanech, etc. If we mecher be mevur from Tuashar, there still wouldn't be a bracha. Ledina Reb Shlomo Zalman held that one should be choishish to the shita of the Tuashar. And therefore, the Bar Mitzvah Bacher should make a shechionu on his hat and his jacket, and have in mind to be called the mitzvah of Anachas Tefillin. This concludes the Chelek Halacha of this today's limud. And as we said, even though this is not directly connected to Bechas HaNehnין, but Hein mitzad the Chavivos of the Ov's Egmer B'Shir Mizmor Chanukas HaMizbeach, the chavivos of having once again koyanim ba'avodosam and levim v'duchanom, and hein mitzad, as we just saw in the shach and the rekeach especially, that our Gemara in Brachos is a unique makar in Kol HaShas for the concept of being mischanech l'mitzvah, which we don't find a parallel even in the sugya of making a shechionu on Pidyon Abed. Today is Chamisha B'Teves. So, state in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah on Daf Chesed Beis, state that there is a tzom called Tzom HaAsiri, the tzom of the Chodesh HaAsiri, which is the tzom of Teves. So there's a nidin in the Gemara what day that is. So we are noyeg. That's what the Gemara's maskana is, that it's Asara B'Teves. Why? Shaboy Somach Melech Bavel al Yerushalayim. That's when Melech Bavel began the siege. Shenemar, we bring the Pesukim, Vayidvar Hashem Elai B'Shana Tchias B'Chodesh HaAsiri, Ba'osal HaChodesh, on the 10th of the month, Lemar ben Odom, K'sov L'cha Shem Hayoim Es Etzem Hayoim Hazeh Somach Melech Bavel al Yerushalayim. This is the Pesukim in Yechezkel, where the Rebbeinu Shalom says K'sov L'cha. This should be recorded as, so to speak, a day of tzara of Klal Yisrael, that the Motzar on Yerushalayim began. Now the Gemara says, V'ani Eino Eimer Kain. The Gemara brings the Gemara brings a Tana that's Chaylek, and the Gemara says that it's Reb Shimon, that Reb Shimon is Chaylek. Elotzoy Ma'asiri ze Chamisha B'Teves today. What happened? Sheboy Bos Shmua LaGoyla. That's when the news reached the Golus of Bavel, Shehuksa Ha'ir, that Yerushalayim had been conquered. Shenemar Vayi B'Shtei Oser Shana. Ba'asiri b'chamisha l'chodesh l'goluseinu, bo elei hapolit m'Yerushalayim leimar huksa ha'ir, v'osu yom shmua ki yom sreifa. And they made the yom shmua like the day of Churban itself. Yom shmua was the yom of Yom sreifa. V'nirim dvara is at the Gemara, v'nirim dvara midvara, the maskana of the Gemara is that should be the asiri, shani yom rishon v'alachar achar, v'u yom rishon achar v'alachar rishon. So the Gemara has a shakla b'tari v'aita, for the reasons why we pass in the way we do, that on the Asiri it was Huksoir. Zok Rashi, Shmuel Lagoila, Lagolus Yichonia, Shagol Labovel Achres, Achesham Lifnei Achorben, Osu Yom Shmua Ki Yom Sreifa. Now, the fact that Yom Shmua has a takeif of a Yom of Sreifa, we find a parallel to that Lo Aleichem in Hilchas Avelus, where Yom Shmua is Mechayiv Avelus. Yom Shmua itself, even though the Misa would have been earlier, the Yom Shmua is Mechayiv and Niyug of Avelus. Yom Shmua. In Kipshuto, the Maskonas HaGemara, the fact that the Yom Shmua was Yom Hey, which relates to the Churban, doesn't seem to be Kaim Ladina. In Drashas Chasim Sofer and the Drashas for Teves, steht a Chiddush Nifla. Steht in Drashas Chasim Sofer that all the Dalet Haniyos are going to be Nepach, L'Sasan and L'Simcha. Gemara brings a pasuk that Koyamar Hashem Tzvakos Tzem Revi Tzem Chamishi Tzem Asiri Yile Beis Yehuda L'Sasan and L'Simcha. Zot the Chasim Sofer L'Asid Lavoi, the Yomim of Yemei Simcha will be Nimshach from Hey Teves until Yud Teves.
What?
They'll be Nimshach from Hey Teves to Yud Teves. Yud Teves is the Yom of the Samach Melech Bavel al Yerushalayim. That is Mefurish in the pasuk. Will be Nepach to Sasan L'Simcha. Chasan Sofer is Mechadish that the Yom Shmua Lagoila will also be Nepach L'Sasan L'Simcha, and the Yom in between will then all be Yemei Simcha. As they state in Josh's Chasim Sofer, which means that what we understand is that Avada L'Doiros, that the Yom HaShmua retains a ration. Avada the Yom Shmua is a Yom of Tzara. Just the Novi, Midivre Kabbalah wasn't Mesakin, or Chachamim weren't Mesakin, that the Tzom HaAsiri should be with the Yom of Shmua, but they were Mesakin it for the Yom of Samach Melech Bavel al Yerushalayim, the Tchilas HaMatzah. But Avada, the Yom itself of Yigia Shmua Lagoila, remains a Yom of Tzara. Ba'ofen that today the Yom Chamisha B'Teves is a Yom which is called in the Gemara Yom Shmua, and that Yom Shmua intensifies in a certain way the Avelus on the streifa of the Mikdash. And Zot the Chasam Sofer, that Roshim remains such that the Yemei Teves, in other places the Chasam Sofer is Mechadish, that the 3 Yomim of Ches, Tes, and Yud, the Shloisha Yemei Choshech that we Yered La'olam because of Tirgum HaTorah L'Yevonis. And the fact that the Slicha at the beginning of the first Slicha of Asar B'Teves mentions that really Asar B'Teves is kill all those 3 Yomim, that certainly will be Nepach. The Chiddush is that even the Yom Shmuah of Hey Teves is also going to be Nepach. What's the beer in that Chasam Sofer? So perhaps we can explain it with a Chiddush that's Mavur in Minchas Chinuch. The Minchas Chinuch explains that the Pasuk establishes that the Tzoyimos are dependent on the Chodoshim. Tzoyim HaSiri, and Tzoyim HaRavi, Tzoyim HaChamishi. The Tzoyimos were Nikva in Chodesh. Zodam Minchas Chinuch, Chachomim were Masakin, which day of the Chodesh the Tzoyim should actually be observed. But essentially, the entire Chodesh is a Chodesh which contains Tzara. Zot Minchas Chinuch, the nafkamina is that that's why all the Tzoyimos could be Nidche, even though the Yom was a specific Yom. So how then could it be Nidche to a different Yom? Zot Minchas Chinuch, because the Tzoyim was Nikva for the Chodesh. Chachamim were masakin that it should be fulfilled on the day of a particular ma'ora. Like there's a machlokes by Tisha B'Av, it should be Tes or Yud, the Yom Shenichnesu or the Yom Asreifa. So Memele Zot Minchas Chinuch, the Tzoyim is in Chodoshim. The Yom is already Chachamim Makaveh, and therefore they allowed it to be Nidche, because we're still fundamentally fulfilling the Chi of Midivrei Kabbalah to have a Tzoyim in that Chodesh. As I stated in Minchas Chinuch in Parshas Emor. Memele, what will be Nepach? Stated in the Gemara. The Chodoshim. Tzoyim HaRavi, Tzoyim HaChamishi, Tzoyim HaShvi, Tzoyim HaSir, Yil Beis Yehuda L'Sasam L'Simcha. The Chodesh will be a Chodesh that's Nepach. There's the Chodesh, which is a Chodesh of Tzara, which Ba'atzem really we have to signify the Tzara of the Chodesh. The Chachomim were Masakin and Tainis. Because one of the Yomim is the Zman where we observe the Tzara of the Chodesh, so the Nepach is going to be in the Chodesh also. Memele Zot the Chasam Sofer, the Yemei Tzara of the Chodesh become Nepach. Either the 3 Yomim of the Ches, Tes, and Yud, or what becomes Nepach is the Yom from Yom Hey all the way through till Yom Yud, because that's all Yomim. The Chodesh is Nepach. It's kedai just to add Dvarim Yeduim that the Beis Yosef brings, B'Shem the Avodrom, that Asar B'Teves is the Yotzem and Aklal, that Asar B'Teves state the Etzem Hayoim Azeh, that in that case it's Doicha Shabbos, because there is a din Midivrei Kabbalah that it has to be on the Yom HaSiyum. I state, Reb Chaim in Grach HaLashaz is marchik to explain this Chiddush. And you say that Dvarim is in Minchas Chinuch. So Asar B'Teves happens to be an exception. But the Yesod Hadvarim is that the Tzoyimos are in Chodoshim. The same way, and the Sherish Hadvarim is Mavur in Gra, that Chodesh Adar is called the Chodesh Asher Nepach Mi Eivel Yom Tov, is because the Goyrol, the poor, was on the Chodesh, and that's why the Yerushalmi says we can carry Megillah in the whole Chodesh. The Chodesh is a Chodesh that's Nepach. That's the same thing. Kedivrei hatzoyimos v'za'akosom, the Megillah says at the end, that the takon of Purim was similar to the takon of Taniyos, because it's the same Yisoid. Taniyos on Nikva and Chodesh, and Megillah was Nikva, and Purim was Nikva and Chodesh. And the haficha la'osid is that the Chodesh will be a Chodesh that will be Nepach. And the Memele Zot the Chasam Sofer, all the Yomim of Tzara and the Chodesh become a Yomim of Yom Tov. The Sikum, 2 Nukudas. It's Mavur Zot the Chasam Sofer that even after Shittas Reb Shimon is Nidche, Hey Teves remains the Yom HaShmuah. It has a Roshim of Avelos, even though we won't get a Tainis from it. It's part of the Tzara of the Chodesh, and the Chiddush of the Chasam Sofer that even it will be Nepach. This is the Ma'oirois of the Yom of Hey Teves. Just to appreciate the Chomer of what the Shmuel being Baal HaGoyla was. The Rambam calls the Tzara of Tisha B'Av an Avelus Yishana. It's Avelus. Misabel on it. So Yom Shmuel has a take. As they state, as is Mavur in the Gemara.
Okay, everybody say. Tonight is 8 o'clock. There'll be a Chazar Shir and Matzai Shabbos at 8, and we'll reconvene.